moment of truth.
Back sooner than expected,
Yeah.
because that Kyphi is so ready.
Oh yeah, it's as done as it's gonna get and needs to be turned out onto the stone.
A moment of sound. Sorry.
So, based on my experience with this last year, one of the things that I also made a purchase of is a pastry stone, a marble stone. They're also used as the cold stone for making ice cream if you're fancy, or you go to Cold Stone Creamery. There's a number of reasons why marble is chosen, and I mean, long and the short of it is what you want is a cold surface that is going to take the heat of this very sticky thing, and it will cool on it better, and you can also get it off of it easier. It is a little sticky from the last bit of Kyphi we had on it yesterday, but we are, let me move this, pardon me, you're all gonna move for a second. No, I just needed this, readjust that, but like this needed to be slightly off of the thing. I didn't want it. Okay, let me give it a couple more turns, but it is really sticky now. Like I am getting a workout just turning this stuff. Okay, taking the heat off.
Exciting.
Putting it over here so we don't
bump.
Yeah. All right. Well, the fun part now is getting it out of the jar. Cauldron thing.
Woohoo! And it takes 2 wooden spatulas.
Oh, it's
wow,
very sticky.
Look at that. Hi, everybody.
Okay. All right. I'm not shaping it yet at all. I'm just getting it out of here.
Do you want a hand with that?
If I need one, I will ask for one.
I got my razor blades for the last bits if we need. They worked so well last night. Oh, hello, everybody.
Thank you for keeping me company through this very long process. I will tell you, last year, sitting over this thing and just cooking it, not really knowing, like, how will I know it's done? The ancient manuscript says, boil until substance reduces water by 1/5. And it was like, but well, what is that really? What does that look like?
Oh, a fellow named Alan is saying that they enjoyed watching you and Katrina on Portals last night, and I guess that they met you at the Thomas house back in 2009.
Oh, hello. That was a great field trip.
Yeah, it does look like a really good batch. And large, also.
This is 150th. Like, this is the original recipe divided by 150.
That's insane. We would need so many giant marble platters.
It's, yeah, I know, it's not a,
oh my gosh.
Not a small quantity. Like, what was it? It's like 2.2 liters of, like they're measuring things in liters and pounds. And in some cases, like, let me see, it's, if I remember correctly, it's 1,943 grams of frankincense, which by metric conversions is a lot.
You know, I tried giving that answer on a math test in 8th grade once, and well, the teacher didn't say it was wrong. They did say it wasn't the answer they were looking for. Oh, someone is asking, is this fudge or incense?
This is incense, but it looks a lot like fudge. So an interesting thing that I got to learn on this entire excursion, researching Kyphi, is that ancient incense was made quite differently from the incense that we are really accustomed to now. Or at least the ancient Egyptians had some different incense making techniques. They used a base of dried fruit, wine, and honey. And in a lot of ways, what we end up with is a little bit more like a kind of like a scented wax puck. In the sense that instead of burning it up on a charcoal, you are heating it. You are warming it and melting it and letting it release a much more complex series of scents.
What did people cook it in originally?
A great big copper pot, which is why I have this big copper pot. So copper pots, copper vessels were the rule of the day, and everything that I have researched indicates that due to the chemical compound of copper, the way it's made up, as well as the chemical reactions that happen to the sugar, the way in which it can heat stuff and heat it evenly, it makes it best for this process. You can get away with like a steel pot, but it does have some difference. Like I made a kind of a Kyphi on the cheap recipe in between waiting stuff, because of course you do the first half of this over the course of 5 days, and then you have to set it aside and wait for 5 days. While we were waiting, because actually like making this incense based off of the recipe as it exists on the walls of the Temple of Edfu is both incredibly time consuming and incredibly costly. We've wanted to see, is there a way to get essentially the same smell and effect with less of the work, without the copper vessel, without like doing this thing for 10-15 days and letting stuff sit? And so far the answer is no. So if you feel like, because I think this is mostly probably too warm for you still, now that I think about it. Okay, I need to.
I like it. Someone is asking, do you always make this? Which I would add, how often have you made it?
So far, it has been a once-a-year project, because it is a commitment of time and energy and resources. I will say that I am now curious enough with some things about the process that I am strongly considering doing another batch fairly soon. And maybe it's because I've got plenty of time here in lockdown, but there's a couple of variations I kind of want to play with. I made this for the first time last year, almost exactly at this time. That was pure coincidence. I wasn't trying to like figure out any like, I don't know,
cosmic cycle.
Yeah, it was just, this was a good time to do it. It makes a little sense to do it closer to summer, but not to like the full muggy heat of summer in Ohio. So I did it, and it was ready in June last year, or at least I tried to make it ready in June last year. This is a substance that must cure over time. And it is not really something that you can rush. I tried to rush it last year with a dehydrator, and it was not quite the same. Actually, the effect of the dehydrator mostly just released a lot of the scent. So the ones that I was trying to like speed through the process, no, I just sort of wasted a bunch of Kyphi.
Sadness.
That said, they were still such a profound, intense, and subtle scent that, like, based on like what we have come to expect from incense, they were still pretty cool.
Yeah, they were way stronger than most incenses I've smelled.
Yeah, this is totally a little dab will do ya. That's an indication of how old I am.
Yeah, I don't recognize the reference, but then when do I?
Brow cream, little dab will do ya.
One person is curious, when things open back up, would we possibly be coming out to Oregon?
I won't rule it out, but I'm going to curtail my travel for a little bit longer than when things probably formally open back up for personal reasons. I was an early heart patient as a child, and given the effects that this particular virus has on blood and heart attacks and clots and whatnot, I'm going to be very, very careful. So, not sure when. Won't rule it out. It's a lovely state. I've been to it before.
Yeah, I live there. Yeah, well, and it seems like for a couple of years now, you've been trying to do more locally so that you don't travel, but so other people can come to Inspiration House.
Yeah, I don't like travel as much as some people do. And I realize that limits a lot of stuff and limits other people. But so yeah, it looks like candy. It cooks up a lot like candy. Like the stickiest fudge on the planet. Okay, I am really, really liking this stone. It is such an improvement from my work with this stuff last year. It was worth the, I don't know, probably, I think it was $40 I paid Williams Sonoma. It was on sale. I wouldn't have bought it if it wasn't on
sale. Such a bargain hound.
I am Capricorn. Oh, this is so first impression. Last year, instead of raisins, I used dates as the base to this incense. And one thing I'm going to say right off the bat, look at that. Look at that. It just, boop, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. With dates, it's a little too sticky.
Great. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Not that dates being too sticky, but this one not being too sticky.
Part of me is still like super skeptical about the dates though, because like the description in one of those is like your fruit raisins, but cut the pits out and wash the insides. And that, seriously, I hold to the fact that does not sound like you are describing raisins, unless raisins 3,000 years ago were so radically different that as to be almost unrecognizable.
Here's a fun question. Have you ever been to Ashtabula County?
Yes.
They have a lot of haunted places.
I have been to Ashtabula County. I had a great Uncle Bill who had a farm in Jefferson, 80 acres, and I have some very, very fond memories of playing with his barn cats and jumping out of the hayloft and apparently nearly impaling myself on a pitchfork, but I missed, so that was good.
Oh boy.
My mom was real upset. I'd seen like, Little House on the Prairie or something, and you know how like I was really young, so like everything was mimicry at that point. So I was like, yay, this looks like fun. So I jumped right out and like landed, and the hay caught my fall, and it was fantastic. And then my mom pulls out this pitchfork and just looks at me. Whoops.
Whoopsie doodle.
I mean, it could be argued that forces have been looking out for me quite a lot. Because as a child, I was sometimes incredibly incautious.
So, Carolee has an excellent idea, I think.
Okay.
We should get our own RV, but I know that doesn't actually.
No, I've honestly considered it. Like one of those. There's the ones that are like kind of the panel trucks, but it's basically like a tiny house on wheels now. Mm-hmm. I've considered it.
I feel like we both considered it. For me, who likes to travel, it would be pretty cool. But I feel like one of the really interesting things for you is that because so much of your work needs you to be in a space that is familiar and comfortable, unless we could somehow determine in advance that you would be able to write in an RV.
Yeah, that I don't know.
It would be a really difficult proposition.
I will say, as someone who toured with a metal band back in the 90s and early 2000s, I find that kind of travel fun and exciting for the first 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
And
then you're far from home and it has
I'm-
to keep going.
There's Charlie, who, if he's still on there, can attest to, one, exactly how fucking cranky I got. Unlivably cranky, I suspect. And also how at one point I couldn't get comfortable anywhere. I was tired of being cooped up with the same people, and I ended up crawling underneath the seats and trying to sleep on the floor in this very bizarre, contorted position.
Oh my.
In like it wasn't a Ford Aerostar, it was like a Chevy. Dodge. It was a Dodge Caravan.
Oh wow.
I get cranky.
Uh-huh. That's secretly my other reason why I don't necessarily want to travel with this one. It's way more relaxing when it's just me.
Well, it's basically like if I hit that point where I'm no longer comfortable, Charlie would basically say, "You become a walking id," and he's not wrong. It would just be like, "I want to stop now. I need to sleep. I need to eat. I need to be out of the sun. Stop. We just need to fucking stop."
Oh,
So,
boy.
yeah.
Is there any literature that talks about using figs in Kyphi?
Not in Kyphi, but there is literature that talks about using very similar incense that uses figs. And in fact, assuming Illyria has not eaten the entire bag of them because she's loving, I picked up some Turkish figs to play with another related type of incense where the base is explicitly figs. So figs, dates, raisins were all used. I mean, we can just buy more. It's okay.
There's still a few. You only wanted 2, right?
I think
You
I'm
said 2 or
like
3,
yeah,
and
no, like
I rounded down.
yeah. No, I'm aiming to like do like a really tiny little like thing of them, and I think I'm gonna be not wanting to make it like immediately. I've got the
You might be
class
done for a
tomorrow.
while.
I think that Sunday would be appropriately a day of rest. I would like to kick my feet up, maybe finish
Yeah.
watching the rest of Undeadwood.
Yes. If we haven't finished Undeadwood by then.
Okay,
you
well
two.
then watch the rest of where we're at with Critical Role, which has become kind of our fun go-to.
Here's a vampire question for you.
Yes.
Is it possible to have someone who is a vampire feed off an elemental?
As in like a being that is an elemental?
I think a person. The person who's asking the question identifies as an elemental.
Oh, so could a regular vampire feed off of an elemental vampire? Yeah, I mean, actually, vampires can feed off of one another, and sometimes that works out kind of well. It only seems to be a real big problem if it's like, you know, husband and wife, or partners who decide that they need to be monogamous even with their feeding, and they only feed off of one another. They're both vampiric. Eventually somebody comes up short, and then both of them are kind of miserable. So in that situation, I would imagine if one of them were an elemental vampire, that would be a fantastic option. So here is, I need to eat people, and here is, I need to take all of the energy from the elements, and the person taking the stuff from the elements takes it and processes it, uses what they can, and can hand some stuff off to their partner. That would work. It may come as some people, as a surprise to some people. In the course of working with and instructing people in handling their vampirism and managing their vampirism, I have served as a donor as well on several occasions. Most frequently when someone who is vampiric has hit a level of starvation where they couldn't really even feed anymore. The act of feeding as a psychic vampire requires a certain amount of energy. You are extending a little of yourself subtly to connect to and pull from people, even if you don't think about it like that. Like there's these little tendrils and lines of energy. And there is a point of starvation where a system has like kind of curled in on itself to such an extent that just even to make that effort is too much. So I've basically been like the psychic IV bag to get somebody like slowly by stages back to a point where they could feed for themselves. And I've done that because I've got a pretty good, like, I think it's safe to say I've got a very solid handle on my energy, how I work with it, what I do with it. which is also why so many people who are white lighters have no idea, are actually shocked. You're not a vampire? You seem so energetic. Like you light up a room. How are you a vampire? And I'm like, I know how it works. And it doesn't, vampire doesn't mean bad. And vampire doesn't mean like weltering pit of shitty, awful energy. Like it actually just means that you have to be aware that you have to take to keep the rest of you going, and be aware of what type of energy you need to sustain yourself.
A couple of people have
Anyway.
been.
Yeah. No, I'm just.
Yeah, more questions.
I'm looking at this and going, I don't know that I.
Okay, I'll ask you a question, then I'll keep doing that, and you can do whatever you want.
Sure. Well, I kind of want to. I'm really excited, like how easy this is.
That's exciting.
Did it right this time.
A couple of people have been asking if you have an opinion on what scents would be good for mermaid incense.
Oh, it is. It's Mermay. It's May. It's the month of May. So there's a.
Oh, I've never connected.
No, as far as like I only found out about it this year through Caroline Jamhor, who makes the art that I really like from Brazil, and like it was like making a mermaid a day or something. Huh. What would I use as scents for a mermaid?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's a specific type of mermaid incense that they're referring to. Or...
No, I think they're asking for like ideas for like what type of a blend would be made. I mean, stuff that would remind me of the ocean and the smell of salt, and a little bit of. I mean, I wouldn't be able to use it if there was kelp or any kind of seaweed in it, and I'm not really sure how that would smell. But I think. Let's see.
Sea spray, something salt.
Lotus, any kind of water flower would be a really good thing. A couple of the things that go into Kyphi come to mind because they're wetlands, they're water plants. So orris root, sweet flag, they're fixatives to scents, but they do have a little bit of scent themselves. And they are the roots of grasses and things that grow in fairly swampy areas. I really think lotus would have to be a part of it. What else?
Can you take this from me?
Driftwood, maybe? Well, it depends. Like, are you going for like a girly mermaid smell, or a gender neutral mermaid smell, or something in between?
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, no, it bears. Actually, it makes me wonder if Mermaid Magical Arts has a mermaid scent. I didn't check.
Yeah. Given their name, it would make sense.
This is so much easier roll. I'm not sitting here in like just a pile of like, oh God, I hate my life. Okay, so
already getting really close to.
Oh, I know it's.
Stop.
You're doing better than I was going to. Like I'd hit. I don't think I can get anything more off of it. Like we could probably heat this up.
Yeah, or I could get the razor.
I'd rather it not.
Okay, that seems fair. Yeah, I think we have reached the point of there is no more.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we got as much of it off as possible.
Yeah. All right. There's the last bit.
I'm just gonna roll that into little balls as we go.
There's more.
Oh yeah, there's definitely more. Here.
Ooh.
Yeah, you play with that as much as you want.
I'm not sure it'll last much longer. It's as it cools, it's very.
Well, one, I don't think I cooked the other one quite as long as I should have.
Okay.
Which meant that it took a little bit longer to cure. So the good news is this might cure and be ready before October, which I'm really excited about. Because I mean, waiting that long would just be rough. But also, I mean, let's see, what is it? It's May 15th, so it's the Ides of May, the E-Days. That's how you pronounce that if you are actually empirical Roman. May to June, June to July, so August. I would say August would be the first time I would like revisit this and see if it is cured properly. I think also taking it over to Inspiration House
to dry there.
Yeah, will be one because it's gonna get to be like left alone. Here, if we wanted it to be, not bothered by cats or whatever, we'd have to put it in the garage where it does get really damp.
Yeah, it is not great for drying. Look, there's a whole nother one.
Okay.
Well, a little one. Well, something.
I got it.
Okay, there's a tiny bit more that I didn't get.
Okay. It's just mostly going to be on my fingers.
Take my Kyphi, take my land, take me where I cannot stand. I don't care, I'm still free. You can't take the Kyphi from me.
Well, that just happened. This happens all the time, by the way. Like randomly singing stuff. Oh yeah, that's normal.
All right. Going back through all the questions. Ooh, yes, there were questions that I was trying to remember, but I couldn't.
Okay.
So the information a bunch of people have found on psychic vampirism is mostly sort of portrays it as very negative.
Yeah, that's why I wrote a book. Trust me, as someone who was coming of age and going, I'm pretty sure this is how my energy works. And I'm like, I think I'm a vampire. I'm not sure what that means because I know that I'm not like a Hammer film vampire. So I started, first I started looking at folklore and I'm like, no. Deeper into the folklore and finding that there were living people who had these abilities was helpful. But it still didn't tell me anything beyond these people were absolutely always portrayed as basically bad people who were attacking their communities. In a lot of ways, they were frequently synonymous with the folkloric witch who was always casting curses and draining life from the grain and just, making it so your butter doesn't come because apparently that's what a witch needs to do because she's pissed off at you. So that led me to the first place I found the word psychic vampire in relatively modern writing was a book called Psychic Self-Defense by Dion Fortune. And she was writing in the 1920s, 1930s. Her real name was Violet Mary Firth, and something that kind of gets lost, I think, when they talk about her as an occultist, is she was also a psychoanalyst. So she had a psychology background. She wasn't just, I don't know, traipsing in her gown through the trees, worshiping the moon and whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think a lot of people who study her in retrospect forget that there was a whole other side to her area of knowledge, and these two things were not exclusive. Okay, so in psychic self-defense, you encounter the term psychic vampire, also astral vampire, which is important, and only in the context of people who suck your energy and who need to be protected against. Astral vampires are even worse because they are, by Dion Fortune's definition, beings, usually black magicians, usually evil humans, who have resisted the second death. So the physical body dies by her worldview, and then the subtle body or astral shell also dies, and that releases the soul. So there's two deaths in her worldview. Make of that what you want. By her definition, an astral vampire is someone who has not been able to unnaturally extend the life of the physical body, but they have unnaturally extended the life of the astral body. And they do that by feeding on the vital energy of others, frequently appearing to them in visions and dreams and acting out things that are like hag attack. And the thing that was hard about that was being someone who absolutely had experiences of what she was describing, both from the perspective of astral vampire and from the perspective of psychic vampire. But she only saw it as a great and evil thing. And I'm going to draw a connection between this and growing up as someone whose orientation is different, who is not straight, whose identity is queer. And the only place you read about queer identities is in fundamentalist texts that tell you, by your very definition, you are a being of evil. It has the exact same effect. It was 1991 in the fall, my freshman year of college, that I ran across psychic self-defense, and that really was where I started on the personal quest of there needs to be a better book.
Hmm.
This is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually an incredibly empowering thing. If I were out of control, if I were an unethical being and just attacking people willy-nilly, I could see some of this. And there are definitely people, especially folks who are unconscious about what they are and what they're doing, who do cause harm. Like they do feed off of people without their permission. That is an unpleasant experience, in much the same way that if you kiss someone who is exuberantly interested in being kissed, that is a wonderful thing. If you randomly go up to the stranger on the street, grab them, and stick your tongue in their mouth, that is assault. It's not fun. You can take something that is actually really great for everybody, a fun celebration of being in a body, and turn it into an awful assault just based on whether or not you ask permission. So vampirism's pretty much the same thing. So I wrote the book, The Psychic Vampire Codex. It actually, so the first version of it was written in 1994. The handwritten version was typed up and sort of circulated in the underground press at that time. There were multiple like expansions and versions of it. There was a version in 96 that came out as part of a series with the International Society of Vampires, which was a group that I founded and ran at that time, long before House Kepru. And then in 1999 to 2000, there was a version that came out through the Sanguinarium. And the only reason I don't really promote that one a whole lot was whoever did the layout and design, I'm not really sure, but I have my suspicions, managed to put so many typos and just egregious misspellings into my otherwise pristine manuscript that when it was published, I simply felt ashamed. Like, Guardians is Guardians.
Oh no.
Like you can go downstairs and check. Like there's a reason why they're in little bags on a shelf downstairs. They were embarrassingly bad. And of course I asked, could you reprint this? And I got like a, oh, ha, ha, ha. That was, and they made up a name. I know that they made up a name. Oh, he was just high when he was putting everything together. It's fine. Nobody cares. Spelling's overrated anyway.
Oh. Yeah. There's a job called editor.
Yeah.
It's
Anyway.
a job for a reason.
Yeah, anyway. So I wrote the Psychic Vampire Codex because I really felt that more that people who had this quality, this ability, this skill, for people whose relationship with energy manifested this way, they deserved more books than just this is how you protect yourself against vampires. All vampires are evil.
Mm-hmm.
Because no, I mean, no. And now it's getting sticky.
Oh, uh-oh.
I think I just rolled that one a little bit too much with a certain amount of ferocity.
You did. Okay. I have a long question for you, but I'm going to read the whole thing because it does a good job of putting context in.
Okay, context is good.
So this is from Benji.
Okay.
I'm trans FTM. My most recent past life, I died a young man. I've wondered if part of my gender identity is slightly influenced by this knowing. Does not mean this drives other people's gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any thoughts on gender identity and past lives? And of course, I'm not trying to imply that every trans or non-binary or intersex person's identity is due to past lives, but
I agree with not everybody, but I spent a lot of time asking the same questions. In another stream, I'd mentioned Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was the founder of the Department of Personality Studies, which was a nice fancy way of saying the parapsychology department at University of Virginia. He is known for his work on children who remember past lives. He focused on children basically under a certain age because he could more reliably guarantee that they had not been front-loaded with a bunch of stuff. And in several of his books, he explores exactly this. The one that comes to mind specifically was a young woman in South America who remembered having been male. And now she was operating at a time where to present a masculine persona, any masculine qualities at all, was perceived to be mentally ill, and in need of being treated and corrected. And Ian Stevenson suggested that it was just that she had carried forward so much of the previous life, the previous personality, that she was effectively a man.
Hmm.
And he conjectured, like, how useful, like, is it detrimental to the current personality to carry forth that much that it causes that big of a conflict? I mean, you and I probably have similar opinion in, I don't think it should cause a conflict. I think society should not be a dick. Um, I Years ago I had started basically a gender reincarnation book. I never like really did a lot of work on it because there were so many different experiences and opinions. But I had surveyed a class that I did a lecture to, and just had everybody who had a different gender identity chime in. You know, is this for you? Like, does reincarnation play a role for you? Does it not? Where does the line fall? I can say with the folks in House Kepru, who I have, worked with closely and, learned alongside with in terms of past lives and gender and identity, every one of us has been something different at least one time. And it does vary from person to person, kind of like how they want to manifest that here and now. For me, I find it very fitting that I was born intersex. I know a lot of people will talk about, like, wanting to pick stuff out. If there's a thing that I try to like make happen as like my ideal, like that needs to happen, I will take compromises on everything else, but please let my body be what the rest of me is. For me, a non-gendered androgyne, like a ni l'un ni l'autre, neither this nor that, is very much how I feel internally and how I suspect I present externally. With a little tip toward male, just because I think, although it vexes me, this particular culture has a hard time seeing someone who is dominant and authoritative outside of a masculine presentation. So, I do think that there is interplay. I also think that there's a lot of current choice that has to go into that. I remember helping someone, and this was 96, process and remember having been female more often than male. And they were currently in a male body. They had wrestled with being bisexual. Even so, I mean, it's Ohio. But like the existential questions that it raised for them of like, must I transition because my soul feels more female? No. If you feel like you are female, that you should be female, then maybe consider it. I think it raises a lot of questions about, how much does our skin determine what we are and who we are? What choices are we willing to make? What choices must we make to feel healthy and whole? I think that's the more important question to ask is, I full disclosure, there was a year where I lived and presented 100% male. And it was my trial time for myself to go, do I want to pursue transitioning? Notably, it was before I had all of the, assessments and workups to go, oh, congratulations, you're actually intersex anyway. But like, I really wrestled with gender and identity. The funny thing is I spent so much time with sorting out the psychic and sorting out the vampire that I kind of like shoved gender and orientation and all of that kind of to the back and really didn't dig into it until 2001 and 2002. So wrestling with that and trying to figure out like how much is it important, how important is it to me that like my outside matches my inside. For me, the decision was there's no way to make my outside actually match my inside. And I'm okay with that because I've worn many clothes, and this is just another piece of piece of costuming for me. And it will vary from person to person. I think for some people, reincarnation does not play into it at all. And again, anybody who's doing past life work, be prepared for the almost inescapable fact that whatever you look like right now, whatever your race is, whatever your gender is, whatever your hair color is, you have not always looked exactly like this. You have had different bodies and different presentations, and that's okay. It does not have to define who you are right now. The important thing is finding out who are you right now, and what might this tell you about maybe how to treat other people better or differently. I've got one friend, a housekeeper member, and I'm going to quote them. God made me a woman so I could be a better man. They are also someone who has a lot of male past lives and were, I think, a little confused about how they ended up female to begin with this time around. And for them, they chose to make it a learning experience to become a more compassionate being overall.
Nice follow-up question to that one is,
Yeah.
do you have any book recommendations for androgynous intersex or NB magical studies?
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted
Oh yeah, please,
to
please.
put a book on screen because this was just gifted to me by a friend who is one of the authors in the anthology, and we also know one of the editors of the anthology. Yay, Lee! This is a fantastic book and contains a bunch of resources for, as it says, queer magic. And I know there are many other books also.
Raven Caldera has one that, full warning, like when I first read it, there were points where I just cried and threw it across the room because Raven does not hold back on anything, but it is called Hermaphrodites. And it explores all of the different gods and goddesses and goddesses whose differently gendered nature has been straightwashed throughout history, and gives you a different perspective on beings like Shiva and Loki, Baphomet, and a number of others. So I recommend that one as well, especially if your approach is more like pagan, pantheistic. Oh, let's see. The fairy tradition, Feri in general, has some really neat approaches to identity and gender. So that one is another one to kind of poke around. And Storm Fairy Wolf has, I think it is called Betwixt and Between. And that is a good place to start if you want to kind of dip your toes in the Anderson fairy tradition pool with all of its peacock angels and weirdness.
So much there.
So much, yeah. Poke, poke, poke. I could just sit here and roll little Kyphi balls all night.
Yeah, you could.
I will need to like actually make food. I'm kind of
you will.
well. I'm delaying partly because the chicken is just defrosting. So
Okay. Good deal.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna use some of that miso broth and add some ginger and add some white pepper. Chop up a couple of the little purple carrots that I like so much.
Those things are so good.
And make some ramen broth. Stick in the chicken. I think I still have celery. Cut that real thin.
I feel like you're almost just teasing yourself now.
Mm-hmm.
The food's gonna be so delicious later. When
I like cooking.
There have been a couple of questions about dreams that we haven't gotten to yet.
Okay.
Mostly they center around the question of, is it possible for someone to have dreams that come true? What is that called?
Okay.
Is it common?
To have dreams that come true is called precognition, foreknowledge. It is also known as foreknowledge or foresight or presentience. Again, foreknowing. It really depends on if you're going with a Latin or a Greek root. Precognitive dreams are some of the most commonly recorded experiences people have with dreams that are paranormal. I have a couple of theories on what's going on with precognitive dreams. I think some are absolutely visions of the future. Not as many. I think that there are some elements that are more dream telepathy or predictive based on telepathy, in the sense of, I'm going to use a big, extraordinary one. Let us say that on September 9th, 2001, you had a dream about an attack, maybe in New York. We all know the event that I'm referencing. Is it that you were foreseeing this event, or were you picking up the people and the worry and the planning and the thoughts that were happening? Because that was not something that just happened out of nowhere. There was planning that went into that, a lot of thought, a lot of people agonizing and thinking about it and visualizing what they were bringing into the world. And if you go off of the theory that we are all connected on some level, we may be able to pick up on those thoughts. And certainly, like, the more intense the emotions and the crisis and the trauma, or the negative emotions, like the fury, the grim determination, like, that may be stuff that you filter out and pick up and pull into your dream. And so this is information you're processing, but not necessarily seeing the future. You're seeing what someone is thinking about. You're seeing what a group of people are planning.
It's really hard to pick out which of those is
No,
going
it's really hard to know for sure. A second thing that happened, and this has happened to me a couple of times, where I perceived something as it happened, and the distinct sense was I was drawn to a person in the waking world. I was perceiving, like, either through them or behind them, and for whatever reason, I call it being, like, called to bear witness, where I get pulled sometimes to somebody I don't think I should know, like right now, but I might have a connection to from the past. That gets a little complicated, but sometimes it's somebody that I know. The one I can think of is, it was a friend. They were driving down the road. They had a panic attack. I happened to be at home asleep. They were thinking kind of like, what do I do? And this is a little bit before, like, the ease of cell phones. And they're trying to, like, calm themselves down so they don't wreck, because they're in a situation where they can't just easily pull over. And the dream that I remember is sort of my attention shifting out of whatever I was doing, and suddenly I'm kind of in the back seat, not in the back seat. I'm not sitting anywhere, but I'm there with them, and I'm helping them deal with this, and I'm kind of perceiving this whole situation and a couple of close calls on the highway. Enough that I noted it, and I recorded some of it, and was able to then find out that, like, that was concurrent. That happened, like, the time I woke up was right about when the person calmed down enough that they were able to pull over to the side of the road. So if I hadn't had that feedback, if I hadn't known, if I hadn't checked the time and noted the time, I think it would have been easy to assume that I was foreseeing something as opposed to experiencing it as it happened. So to make it, it's not simple. I'm not making it simple. I'm making it more complex, because it's just not simple. It is possible to have visions of the future, though. And a part of me is a little conflicted with that, simply because I do feel that the future is constantly changing. There are many possibilities and paths. And I think what's most likely happening with precognitive dreams is you are seeing likely, probable future threads. They may be averted, they may come to pass, but there is such a thing as prophecy. It does happen. Most of the folks I know who have dreams that come true are pretty torn up about them. It was one of the abilities my grandmother had, and she hated it. She was incredibly conflicted about it. I think it contributed to a lifelong anxiety disorder, among her other many problems. And she resented God because of this. Like, she was raised to believe that these abilities, they were gifts from God. And she's like, it's a shitty God because all I ever see is death, destruction, and despair. Like, why do I have to witness this stuff? She hated it.
Yeah. There's general agreement in the comments that precognition can suck.
Oh, it totally sucks. Like, there's Cassandra in Trojan Myth, where like she sees stuff but nobody listens to her, and basically having these prophecies does her exactly no good at all. It doesn't stop anything. It really just gets people looking at her funny. My kind of benchmark, I don't think it was a precognitive experience. This is actually where I kind of developed I think it's telepathic, like just kind of picking up stuff that's going on, is I had a dream about the Space Shuttle Challenger blowing up the day before it happened. I was in 7th grade, and so, didn't think, too much. Like, it was a distressing dream, but I had no expectation that that was going to be the whole thing that happened that day. And when I came home, I hadn't told Graham what my dream was. We would usually talk about dreams in the morning, which I think has contributed to like a lifelong relationship with remembering my dreams. The more you talk about them, the more you recount them, and the sooner you recount them upon waking or write them down, the likelier you are to get a lot of that. So, at night I come home from school and I'm rattled. I'm in 7th grade, and I'm sure that I have failed in averting a disaster. Like, I am somehow now to blame because I foresaw this and I didn't say anything. So I kind of talk about that at the dinner table. And the first thing Graham says is, anybody can be psychic after the fact. And she said it kind of in a very critical, dripping sort of way, which, turned out she elaborated on that. Like, it's easy to look at the headlines and after reading the headlines claim, I foresaw that, I dreamed that, I saw that, not even intentionally lying to someone, although that's certainly possible, but retroactively interpreting something that was broader and going, oh, that dream I had about being in a submarine and having it explode was actually that 747 that blew up. Not actually at all beyond there was an explosion, and you're making the conclusion. You're kind of trying to make your experience retroactively fit facts so that you can feel validated, so you can go, oh, that's what that was. So that's where she kind of encouraged, always write shit down. That lesson stuck. And honestly, the other thing that stuck was, reasonably, what were you going to do? You're a 7th grader. Like, what were you going to do? I still don't have a good answer for that. Like, what do you do with that? I'm not sure. My best is bear witness, take some of the premonitions under advisement, and don't assume that they will absolutely come to pass. But if there's something that you can prepare for within reason, there's what's that saying? Hope for the best, expect the worst.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've got time for maybe one more question before we stop. So we definitely won't be able to get to everyone's questions.
Yeah, there's
but there will be more live streams in the future. I think
I'm
for a second.
No, I'm not going to take a bite.
Oh no. Oh my gosh.
I like, okay, so the other batch, the myrrh was a little too overpowering, and I like this 2 to 3, it was 3/4 of a cup, so half a cup myrrh, and then the rest of it was opoponax, which is a slightly more peppery but also sweet myrrh. it has a lot less of that like really sharp, like immediately bitey smell that the raw Kyphi had last time before it cured. Okay, so questions. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. So the last question that I want to ask is going back to vampirism again.
Yeah.
And it's a two-parter because I'm sneakily trying to sneak two questions into one.
Okay.
But it is, first, how can you tell that you're a vampire? And two, if you may be vampiric because of a chronic health condition, does that mean that you'll be permanently vampiric? Or is it an identity that can come and go throughout your life?
If it's due to a chronic health condition, you are vampiric. You don't have to be a vampire. You don't have to make it part of your identity. And it's entirely likely that it's something that you could recover from if the chronic health condition could also be addressed. Actually, there was a fellow I knew, not vampiric at all until he had a fairly catastrophic car accident, and it screwed up a whole bunch of him. He was somebody who was an energy worker and magical, so he knew what to do with his energy, and he had this accident, and he kind of like pushed his body to really perform better than all of the bits and pieces being held together with, titanium and whatnot probably should have been working. And he absolutely manifested vampirism after that. So he became vampiric because now he was expending this huge amount of energy to make a body that was broken work exactly the way he expected it to, based on how he had been able-bodied prior to this. So to push past the pain, push past certain mobility issues, like just really force himself to make the meat suit work against everything that the meat suit wanted to do. So that was one of the first places where I was like, huh, okay, not born vampire, but certainly vampiric now. Got it. What was the first part of it?
It was, how do you tell if you're a vampire?
Oh, yeah, the $1,000 question I get asked all the time. I always feel like a broken record of pay attention to, spend some time getting to know your relationship with energy, and particularly your relationship with energy and people. How do you feel when you spend a lot of time by yourself and alone without the kind of contact and interaction that would ordinarily like have energy coming to you? Deep conversations with friends, intimate interactions with lovers, usually think of like intense or emotionally charged interactions, because especially if you're unconscious, those are the best routes to get what you need. So assess if because with most empaths, the answer is going to be, I don't like going to large crowds of people because going to large crowds of people makes me feel overwhelmed and I feel drained afterwards, and it takes me a while to feel better. And most people who are vampiric, even if they're incredibly introverted like me, because there's a part of me that does not like being around people, and there's a part of me that feels very energized, sometimes overwhelmed, but very energized by being in crowds, being in front of crowds. Like there is something that I get out of that. And then for me, it was becoming conscious so that that wasn't just a one-way street, so that like I would give as much as I was getting, and we would make it an exchange, a kind of dialogue of energy. For folks who are in quarantine right now, I think it's starting to highlight the fact that everybody needs energy. Everybody exchanges energy and is taking and giving all the time. And so if you are a human being, a person in a human body, and you have been isolated for days on days and days with no contact with others, you're going to start to experience a lot of the same things that psychic vampires experience in a much shorter period of time. So having no option to interact with other people, and to have the natural exchange that comes from being with other people, you may find yourself craving long walks, craving some way of getting energy from some other sources. And you may still find yourself starting to just sleep too much or getting in, like having your sleep disrupted. It usually is bouts of insomnia mixed with bouts of sleeping too much. Like it just, you're kind of discombobulated, worn out in a way that you can't necessarily put your finger on. You start to feel a kind of malaise where you're not necessarily sick, but you don't feel good, aches that don't have a whole lot of explanations. Um, and that can get and escalate to a point where, you're just like, what the fuck's wrong with me? Like, do I have MS? Is this fibromyalgia? What's going on? And if you experience all of those, and additional things, like it varies from person to person, but basically it is taking a toll even on your physical body. If interacting with people, if intimate contact, if a great deep conversation with friends, if going out to a club or a ball game where you are surrounded by people, if just doing that alleviates those symptoms, you're probably at least a little vampiric. And then the question is, but what now? Just be conscious of how you interact with energy. It's really, like, the vampire word is big and scary. It's unfortunately the best word we have in the English language for people who need to take and have this relationship with vital energy. And don't worry about, like, oh, does this make me a predator? Oh, must I now stalk around my house in, a cloak and look all spooky, dress all in black?
No,
Only
that's
if you,
just fun.
I was gonna say, only if you think it's cool. It's really just being aware of how you engage with energy, being conscious so that you're not accidentally taking from people, so that you are interacting in a way that is functional and consensual, ideally. Finding ways to finding what types of energy work best for you. The term elemental vampire has come up here a couple of times. There are some people who, the reason the word vampire fits is, for most folks, they're limited in the kind of energy that will sustain them, that they need and that they take. Your average person can just kind of, like, futz around in the world, and there's lots of different types of energy that will sustain them. I think after long periods of isolation, the lack of human energy is going to take a toll. And you'll notice that that's actually one that we all kind of need on some level or another. But elemental vampires are more tuned to elemental forces, so they will find themselves charged and recharged by storms and elements. Although I will say that I was skeptical of the fellow who was really convinced that he was eating the electricity out of sockets.
I mean, that doesn't sound tasty.
I was skeptical. I mean, at least he didn't stick his tongue or fingers in said sockets. He like.
I mean, there are ways to measure energy draw.
Yeah.
From a socket.
That's true.
That would actually be a fun experiment, to find someone who identified that way and then be able to be like, is it measurable?
That's true. I am as like appearances on Monsters and Mysteries in America and a couple of other things attest. I am totally down for running experiments on this. I think it's cool. To be honest, it was one of my ulterior motives for working with the paranormal shows, was getting access to all the toys to, like,
figure out how this stuff works.
Okay, these things measure energy. Do they? Do they really? Okay. So let's measure this thing. Can I play with the FLIR?
Okay, one very last follow-up question.
Okay.
So you can be both an empath and a vampire?
Yes. A lot of folks who are vampiric, the energy that you're taking from people, it carries information. Think of it also as a data stream. So some of the easiest recognizable information that comes along on that are emotions. Kind of a deeper layer, or at least I perceive it as a deeper layer, are thoughts, images, memories. And at least for me, it's possible to kind of really sink down in that layer and get a pretty profound reading off of a person, whether I mean to or not, just because that's how they taste. Not to be creepy about it.
Awesome. All right. I think it's time to get you fed up on
Food
something more than just energy.
Food would be good. I have
This human
had,
body
yeah,
has
I've had
demands.
what, half a loaf of banana bread and
but
a
like a
protein
tiny-
bar. Well, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
a tiny loaf, so about that much banana
Yeah.
bread, like it was itty bitty loaf.
A nibble of banana bread.
And 2 wedges of skinny cow or whatever it's
Yeah,
called.
laughing cow.
Laughing
oh,
cow.
you can't remember the name. You do need food.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Probably time to go.
When the words start coming out wrong, that's how we know. All right. Thank you everybody for being here so much. I think we'll probably not live stream tomorrow because we have the first session of the class tomorrow. And tickets are still available. There are links a couple times throughout the comments here and on other live streams that we've done. We may pick up again next week. We will see. Depends on, well, I guess it depends on how Michelle feels and how many books get started.
Well, I'm liking the questions about past life stuff because the next book that I have agreed to work on is Past Lives, and questions help me figure out like what needs to be answered. So
yeah. So I mean, we could do a more topical Q&A also.
I'm going
to with all that. Thank you all so much for being here. It was lovely. Conversations are so much better when there are like 20 people tossing up questions. All right. Have a good night and rest well when you rest.